So, the United States is going to run Venezuela. After this weekend's capture of Nicolás Maduro, that is what President Donald Trump says is going to happen anyway. So what does it mean for America to run another country? Is there any good case for taking out a corrupt socialist authoritarian like Maduro? Welcome to the Reason Roundtable. This is your libertarian review of news and culture. I am your host, Peter Suderman, and today I am joined by my colleagues, Katherine Mangu-Ward, Matt Welch, and returning special guest, Robby Soave. Happy Monday, everybody. So over the weekend, as you probably know, U.S. forces entered Venezuela, struck multiple targets from the air, and they captured Venezuelan president, or the guy who calls himself president anyway, this is a matter of dispute, Nicolás Maduro. And now Trump says the U.S. is going to run Venezuela, quote, until such time that we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So far, we don't have many details on what this means. So I'm just going to start with you, Matt. What do you think it means that we're going to run Venezuela?
I don't think that we have any idea what it means, because Donald Trump, as is his wont in and out of the presidency, is to say a lot of different things about the very same thing. So we don't know. It means that we have not even done a regime change war. I've been saying on this podcast for a while that he's been looking to do regime change on the cheap. This is regime decapitation. Not literal, but did a kidnapping and snatch and grab and killed 32 Cubans, which is very interesting. So you got remove those people. But as of the moment that we were podcasting this, which is all subject to change, the super commie vice president is the one we're doing business with. And the regime is still in place. And it's really unclear what it means to say that we are running a country where we don't have people on the inside doing the running of the country. So anyone's guess is as good as anybody else's. I just would say that part of the context of the last 48 to 72 hours is that Donald Trump has done more to destabilize international relations in a very short, concentrated time than a lot of people have done in a long time. A pretty amazing amount of tub thumping about Iran, about Greenland, about Mexico, about Colombia. And so we are heading to some very, very uncertain times right now.
Okay, so that does not sound like a positive review of the military action over the weekend. I don't think Matt is a big fan here. But Katherine, is there a good case for this? Is there any kind of, is there like steelman this for us? Like give us the sort of the best reasoning for this? Because look, Maduro is a bad guy. He is somebody who stole an election. He is some sort of communist, socialist, corrupt, whatever, right? And he has eviscerated his people. And there are Venezuelans who are celebrating this, right?
Yeah, that is the steelman. The steelman is, wow, Maduro sucks, because he really, really does. And his predecessors also sucked, and that the people of that country have suffered horribly. Millions and millions of them have left. They came to this country under protected status, which Donald Trump has revoked and says at this point, I think that he's not planning to restore. So I don't know what's going on there. Again, left hand has no idea what the right hand is doing. But that is the steelman. The steelman is that the U.S. has an interest in what is going on in its general vicinity. Whether you want to say the words Monroe Doctrine or not is up to you.
You got to put the word hemisphere in there. We're going to talk about hemispheres in a little bit. I've heard the word hemispheres more times in the past 2 days than like the whole rest of my life.
Yes. And that Venezuela has been a force for bad in that area for a long time. This is, to be clear, not my view, but it is my best characterization of what people are saying, as Trump would say.
So why do people still think this? Why is this still a kind of a prevailing view in the administration? First of all, in an administration that ran on, we're not going to be the neocon warmongers. And second of all, in 2026, I guess 2025, right? Like leading up to this, but like, we are we're 2 decades after the Bush administration and the Bush presidency. And you can almost understand why the Weekly Standard, where you worked at during the Bush administration, like why they were just like, yeah, we're just going to do regime change wars and it's going to be awesome. You can almost understand that. But why do we still think that now, 20 something years later?
Hubris is eternal, I guess. That's not an adequate answer, actually. So let me try and give a real answer, which is, yes, like this rhymes so aggressively with the Iraq War, right? Like the humanitarian case for the Iraq War, which was like millions of people are suffering under a horrible dictator whom we could remove with relatively little effort and relatively little cost. The removal itself will be speedy, and we can do it. And so we should. And then those people will be more free. And you like freedom, don't you? And also maybe America will be more safe. And you like safety, don't you? And also something global oil markets. And you like oil, don't you? And also something stability in the region. And you like stability, don't you? And I was kind of convinced by those arguments, as I've said many times on this podcast during the Iraq War. And I feel very much like I'm not going to be convinced again. Marco Rubio was on the Yappity Yap shows saying the whole foreign policy apparatus thinks everything is Libya, everything is Iraq, everything is Afghanistan. This is not the Middle East, and our mission here is very different. This is the Western Hemisphere. I have never been accused of being the foreign policy establishment, but I do think everything is Libya. I do think everything is Iraq. I do think everything is Afghanistan, because it is.
Robby, what about the politics of this or the messaging around it? Kind of both is what I want you to talk about here, right? Because on the one hand, you have Republicans in the past several weeks leading up to the strike that took out Maduro. You have Republicans complaining that the administration has not made a sufficient case for what they're doing in the Caribbean, for all of this gunboat diplomacy, for the kind of lead up to, I don't know if we want to call this a war. It's like, it's a war in all but name, right? Rubio says it's not a war, but like, it's kind of like a war, right? But the Republicans have been complaining. And then you have Democrats telling Axios over the weekend that actually they don't want to criticize this because it makes them look weak. And Democrats are going to be on board with this. And then you also have polls showing that Americans are not on board with the way that the administration has handled Venezuela. So Americans don't like it, Republicans don't like it, and Democrats are scared to criticize it. But like, what do we make of this sort of the weird kind of inverted, flipped politics of all of this?
I mean, one of the key differences, one of the ways it is different from Iraq is that George W. Bush sought approval to wage the war in Iraq. That is a key difference here, is that this is being done under the auspices of some sort of law enforcement action, which, is a startling new justification for the president to do whatever he wants that maybe we're going to get into in a little bit. In terms of the politics, it's confusing in maybe some respect because both parties have a long-running kind of bipartisan foreign, sniping at each other, but supporting the kind of intervention more broadly at the elite levels, at the party levels, than is supported by the American public time and time again. This was one of, frankly, Donald Trump's key and correct insights when he criticized the Republican Party for the disasters in the Middle East. He ran a year ago for his for the 2024 election saying no new wars. And that was an appealing promise to people all across the political spectrum. That has been obviously not just violated, up and down the line in the weekend, but violated incessantly since he came back to power. This is the kind of, in some ways, a neocon fantasy right out of the Bush administration, what they're doing now. At the same time, I too enjoy the images of Venezuelans celebrating everywhere in Venezuela, in America. Every person I know who's from Venezuela is celebrating, even if they're totally non-political or have totally anti-Trump opinions in every other respect. The only people who seem upset about this are upset about the ouster of Maduro are, like communists. So that is hard to just write off entirely, but we must, as libertarians, be clear-eyed and look to what does this say about the norms of international diplomacy? What does this say about constitutional norms? Will we look back years later and say, man, this was a boondoggle, particularly if it's simply replacing one communist dictator with another, with his own vice president who has no more legitimacy than he did?
Matt, I want to say 4 words to you and then just have you respond to them. Rules-based international order.
It's over.
Yeah. Did it ever exist though? Doesn't this in some? I mean, this is an argument that I've seen being pushed around. Is what this shows is that was only ever there for show, and it has always been the case that great powers just do what they want.
I mean, is Is NATO for show? Is the World Bank for show? Is the International Monetary Fund for show? Have they done nothing during that whole period of time? Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Everything, tweeted over the weekend something along the lines like, after World War II, people, the West did this horrible thing where instead of like doing the real good victory, they led all the third world in their countries and then they became weak. This is a paraphrase. I think it was his wife who did the Greenland as an American flag tweet, which is super mature for a human being to do, let alone someone who's married to power. But at any rate, that is like putting a tattoo of "I haven't read a book" on your fucking forehead, because the post-World War II order was written by America, largely in conjunction with a lot of other people too. But as such things, and I neglected to mention the global agreement for tariff and trade reductions and the WTO that came out of all of that. So the kind of multilateral reduction of tariffs and the assumption of security guarantees for rebuilding countries that didn't have anything, and then a lot of attention paid to what happens to refugees and borders and all of these things that America led in the post-war World War II order, did accomplish things that are of value. And as I again have been saying for a really long time now, 10 years, the rise of Trumpism is directly an expression of fatigue and irritation about that, and a misapprehension, I think, that entire order was contrived as a scam that rips off America, without sort of seeing the benefits that America gleaned from it. Underneath that was also an insight that those things are kind of running on autopilot and we're not checking in at all with democratic legitimacy. So there's something to that. And the liberal internationalists have never had a really good answer to that at all, except, pointing to the scoreboard of 1949, which only gets you so far. So we're finally seeing right now, literally right now, this weekend, we're seeing what applied we're going to break that order looks like. And one of the things it's going to look like is that America is going to act, it's going to shred its own soft power. It's going to act like a regional bully and bribe and cajole as necessary to project its own strength and expand territory. I mean, Trump on day one signed an executive order renaming Mount McKinley because of, and the first thing he said was not tariffs. The first thing he said was that he expanded our territory. I mean, he's just saying, I'm going to do this. And as part of doing that, and this is where Greenland is important, he's going to do it in such a way that will eventually, I think, undermine NATO. So we will see. We're going to see a global arms race and regional bullies emboldened, and a lot of people who are smaller thinking about ways to arm themselves to the teeth so they don't become the next Maduro.
That brings us to our discussion of hemispheres, right? The word that I've heard so many times this weekend. Katherine, I think it was J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, whose justification for this was, look, armed conflict is not exactly what I like here. On the other hand, they're stealing our stuff, and you can't do that in our hemisphere. We're the United States. We're gonna go after you. Rubio, as you noted, has been going around and making the rounds saying, we are going to control this hemisphere. This is our hemisphere. And in some ways, it's okay, that's America first. We're going to dominate kind of our sphere of influence. But that also sounds to me like there is a way in which the Trump administration is preparing to give ground to China, to accept that maybe China is going to have more control of its hemisphere, because that's not our hemisphere. We don't have to worry about that as much. Do you think that that's sort of how this plays out? And if so, is that something that you're looking forward to? Yeah,
I do think that's a possible interpretation. As always, to be fair, probably it's all of the interpretations. It is probably both that we took Maduro out to demonstrate our strength and put the fear of God into China, and also that we are talking about hemispheres because maybe we want to de-escalate with China and just divvy up the globe. Superpowers have done it before, certainly. And so I think we should never make the mistake of assuming some kind of consistent grand strategy. That's not a thing that is happening in this administration. But more importantly, this is as a libertarian, I sometimes, get a little squicked out when people talk about what we did when they mean something the U.S. government did. Because that's not actually, it's we in the sense of we the people, but it's not we in the sense of something that Donald Trump does is not something that I did. And I think it's important to distinguish that. that applies triply.
You just
so.
funded it with your tax dollars.
Right, but not willingly, and that's an important part. Similarly, it's when our hemisphere, like those people are not willingly, they are not part of a deliberative process where these decisions were made. They are not voluntarily paying in dollars or in lives. They have not been given a choice. If there is to be a we, one would hope it would have some kind of collective democratic component. And of course it doesn't, because there isn't a we. It isn't our hemisphere any more than it was Maduro's hemisphere.
Yeah. Definitely the funniest argument here, since you said that there's no, right, since you're talking about like the arguments being made for this, is that this is actually going to save us money. That there is a $50 million, right? Like this is Doge, but for foreign policy. That because there was a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head, that the United States now doesn't have to pay this, and that is saving us $50 million. And so here we are, we're cutting government and we're restoring freedom. I don't think that's actually what's happening. Robby, one of the other arguments here, speaking of money, is that this is nothing to do with democracy. But Cuba, right? Maybe Marco Rubio is interested in it, but what's really going on is that this is about oil. And in fact, Donald Trump is out there saying, look, we've been telling the oil companies. They knew this was coming for days. When we were talking about them afterwards, they were going to send people in, and that this is just a play for American oil, and that's all that this is. And it's there's a kind of a sort of corrupt Trumpian, like he's just in bed with the big oil corporations. Do you think that this is a correct interpretation? And if so, like, what do we make of that?
I mean, it's consistent with what Trump himself said about the Iraq War, right? Way back when he said, well, we shouldn't have done it, but if we did do it, we should have taken the oil. There's a kind of Settlers of Catan-esque resource accumulation thing that just appeals to Donald Trump. It might, frankly, be the most coherent part of his thinking, because this is not a particularly ideological person. He just
rolled a 7, and now he's put the robber on Maduro, and he's got his hand out like, give me a sheep.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Unlike maybe his own vice president, J.D. Vance, who is more ideological in his foreign policy thinking and is, trying to explain how this fits in with an America First ethos, even though perhaps behind the scenes he doesn't even exactly agree with it. Donald Trump kind of just does what he thinks he wants to do. We talked about or heard that he didn't like the way Maduro was dancing or mocking him, and he wanted to project toughness. Maybe it is about discarding the rules-based international order and being more clear-minded and saying, well, none of these rules constrain China's behavior. None of them constrain Russia's behavior. Russia is doing whatever they want. China will do whatever it wants. The U.S., I think this is some of the thinking on the Republican and America First side, is that these international organizations, this post-World War II consensus, is not working to constrain our giant adversaries. Our giant adversaries are more competently run, unfortunately, by authoritarians who are better at staying in power, like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, than their predecessors were. They are big threats. No more rules-based order. We will do whatever we want because they're doing whatever they want. I think honestly, it's more about that than it is about, maybe to Donald Trump, it's about oil, but to the people who are advising him, it's about it actually is the hemisphere argument. And I'm hearing them say things like, well, we've intervened in our own hemisphere all sorts of times throughout American history for all the ways in which it is similar to what we've done here to Iraq and Syria and Libya. They will say, the America First Trump people, that culturally and religiously and for all sorts of other reasons, it is a place, Venezuela, more like us, America, than those were mistakes. This isn't a mistake for that reason. Now, whether you're persuaded by that, I'm certainly not, and probably most of us are not. And I'm very much not persuaded because they didn't bring that case to Congress, which is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to say, vote for this war for this reason, and we can have debate about it. And if the American people disagree, they can hold you accountable for it. We missed that important step. I guess we're always going to miss it. Still very bad.
Yeah, I think if Donald Trump thinks we're going to get all of that oil, I mean, if you just look at like the reports on the state of what is, those oil fields there, the equipment, right, it's just going to cost tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. He is in for a crude awakening. Katherine. Yeah, that's right. That's right, Katherine. The last question I want to ask you about this is talk about the way that this is an outgrowth of the drug war, because, we've got all of these justifications. Oh, it's actually about constraining Cuba. Oh, it's actually about putting China in their place, or sort of divvying up the world with China. But then the pretext for the legality of this is Maduro is an illegitimate president who stole the election. I think that's probably true. Who is like a wanted fugitive from the United States government for being a drug trafficker, right? And so he has been brought to Manhattan on drug trafficking charges. And this is just more prosecution of the drug war, right?
Yes. I mean, this is, much of the Trump administration has been stuff happening that libertarians used to kind of vaguely threaten as a hypothetical. And people would be like, don't be stupid, libertarians. That's not going to happen. No one does stuff like that. So you're like, well, what if the president started calling out the National Guard into cities on various pretenses, but maybe as an intimidation tactic? People were like, that's not going to happen. Don't worry about that. What if the war on drugs got so wildly out of hand that it was used to as the primary driving pretext of our entire foreign policy, and indeed used to remove a sitting president from a sovereign nation? And people would be like, you goofy libertarians, just lay off the wacky weed. And it's like, here we are. It happened. And no one's going to be like, oh, congratulations, guys. You did a good job looking out. Wish we'd listened. But this is absolutely the fact that this has all happened, admittedly under the thinnest veil of justification of the war on drugs. And if it had not been the war on drugs, it would have been something else. So I don't want to say that, there weren't many roads to get us to this place. But yes, of course, that's very real. And the fact that that was the thing they felt like they could get him on is a reminder that it's the thing that they feel like they can get everyone on. You, me, everyone listening to this podcast, everyone, everywhere, actually.
It's all downstream of the drug war. Matt, close this out. As I've been reading about all of this and trying to process this over the weekend, it just sort of seems to me like we are returning to a 19th century model of geopolitics. It's not just what's going on in Venezuela. It's the tariffs. It's the spheres of influence. It's great power conflict. This is the pre-World War vision of the world that we are now returning to and sort of rebuilding under Donald Trump. Am I right? And should that worry us?
I would put this more in as a consistent thing that we've seen sporadically over the last 128 years, let's say, since the Spanish-American War of 1898 really kind of injected us into the imperialistic game, and especially exercised our Navy in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean and elsewhere. We snatched Manuel Noriega, threw him in prison for drugs in, 89, 88? We did Grenada. We did the Dominican Republic. We've done Cuba, tried to do Cuba several times. It looks like we're going to try to do Cuba again in some way, shape, or form, or at least threaten them to such a degree that they might act differently. We'll see. I think there's reason to be skeptical that will be successful for all of the same reasons that the other ones haven't been successful as well. But America has a tradition of asserting and enforcing the not just the Monroe Doctrine, which came before we had a Navy worth talking about, but the Roosevelt corollary when he started swinging around a big stick. And now we have the Donroe Doctrine, which is all very consistent with what the Trump administration's own national security strategy policy stated. So I see it more as a continuity. What it does is that it removes the kind of fig leaf of both international sort of legitimacy, and even, a lot of what we were doing in the 60s, in the 50s, in the Caribbean was under the rubric of, well, this is for the grand strategy of fighting a Cold War. We don't have a grand strategy. Grand strategy is that my boxes is Greenland. And the administration and the applied American first logic now is that America, as interpreted by them, will have no impediments in North and South America or near North and South America. And that's an interesting thing to do without any other overarching kind of justification for it. But I think what they're going to find is that what America has excelled in, which is having attractive soft power over the years, is going to dry up very, very quickly with with consequences that are currently not predicted that won't be as satisfying as seeing a rat bag like the Maduro family in
I have
jail.
to say, like, whenever Matt starts talking and he says Spanish-American War in like history dad voice, I feel my blood pressure just like drop, even though he's always conveying bad news. Like the history dad is not here with good news, but he is here with calm news. And I appreciate that.
Do you watch Ken Burns documentaries to fall asleep to help you with stress? Is
I do not.
What you're recommending?
I don't like all the violins.
The History of the Americans podcast is excellent for sleeping.
I listen to podcasts about the fall of civilizations to calm down, and so
like this one. Like this one this week and probably in future weeks. We are going to talk about this a lot, I am sure, on future episodes, but we're going to move on right now. Before we do, however, big news. We have a Reason Roundtable Live coming up right here in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, February 4th at 7 p.m. This is at the D.C. Improv on Connecticut Avenue in DuPont Circle neighborhood. Katherine Mangu-Ward, Matt Welch, Nick Gillespie, and yours truly. We will be talking about the news and taking many of your questions, but you got to buy tickets. You got to buy a ticket to come see us. And promise, this will be a podcast that does not put you to sleep. Get your tickets and more details at reason.com/events. That's reason.com/events coming up next month. Okay, we have talked about socialism in Venezuela. Let's move on to a discussion of socialism at home. Zohran Mamdani was sworn in as the new mayor of New York City. And at his inauguration speech, he promised to govern as a democratic socialist. And he said, and this is a quote, "We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism." Matt, you live in New York. Are you feeling the warmth? Is it cozy? Is it like an Afghan blanket?
One funny thing about Mamdani is that he appears to be some kind of troll, or at least he has a way of luring people like us out of our caves and saying, "My God, can you believe he said that?" Recall that when he gave his victory speech, which we talked about on this podcast, he had a line in there about, "We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about. Because I'm a commie." No, he didn't say that last part. But clearly, when he has time to sit and prepare some remarks, he loves to get in a line like that. Everyone's going to look at the horrible warmth of collectivization part. Don't sleep on rugged individualism. First of all, it's a term that came to describe not an eastern city, but the western frontier. But second, more importantly, history dad time. It came from a really, really great speech by Herbert Hoover in 1928 in New York City, actually. A very successful speech to talk about the kind of what makes the American experiment American and how it deviates from socialism. And that's underneath that freedom, we're going to flourish and create all kinds of wonderful things. The other part of the speech, or even that sentence that Mamdani said, is that he has the word replace. We will replace the frigidity, even replace, put it to Mad Libs. We will replace X kind of like societal notion or characteristic of the population. My dude, you will not replace anything. It's not up to government, let alone your government, to replace something about the polity, the characteristics of the people that you misgovern. That kind of hubris is astonishing, would be laughable if I didn't live underneath it, but ultimately it's going to fail, because you're not going to successfully replace characteristics inherent in the American people. Go fly a kite.
It sounds like a great replacement to me.
Yeah. That's exactly where I was going. Great replacement theory. Did not know we were going to have that on our bingo card today. But Katherine, just want to ask you about this, like the same line here, right? The frigidity of rugged individualism. I mean, like, you're an individualist and maybe a little rugged, right? You consider yourself an individualist. How do you feel about, why is it always described like this? It's not a chilly ideology. And in fact, this always drives me crazy, because when you talk to libertarians, actual libertarians who do this, especially people who do this for a living, they're always like, what I want to do is help the poorest people. I want to help everybody, but I especially want to help the people who are struggling the most. And I think this system is the best way to do it. Even if you disagree, that's the motivation. Why is it that, like, the commies, the socialists, the Mamdanis of the world never understand that, never appreciate it?
Don't sleep on frigidity. I'm objectively pro. as a chilly gal myself, and I think that
chilly except for the office temperature.
The office temperature. It's cold here in the office. When Matt said Mamdani was a troll, I thought he was making a joke about him being in the subway tunnels. Also, like he's playing with imagery and he's good at it. And part of that is my side is all the good warmth in the world, and the other side is all the bad cold in the world. And of course he's wrong about that. But I think the real answer is, like, if you want to know what is going to make New York better off, it is none of these adjectives, right? Like, it's actually just the verb. It's like, what's he going to do? What are the policies going to be? For that, I commend to you Reason's new issue, which is all about Zohran Mamdani and the policies he might do in New York and how they might go. There's a rotten apple on the cover, if that gives you a clue about how we think they might go. But I do think
Matt
it's
Welch come up with that metaphor?
I do not like politics by aesthetics, and I think that those lines from Mamdani so often are just like, what are the vibes going to be? Like, the revolution is not vibes and white papers, okay?
Robby, what is the revolution? Seriously, what are the vibes going to be? Why? Like, Matt's right. He's a troll. He is trying to get a rise out of people. He is basically like writing his speeches in a way that is designed to get the New York Post and Reason Magazine and the Wall Street Journal really mad. Congratulations, kind of worked. I'm not that
nailed
mad,
it,
but like a little bit mad, right? Does that tell us anything about the way he's actually going to govern?
Absolutely. I'm not even sure his main goal with that kind of line is to get people mad. I think it's a dog whistle. I think he wants to signal to people who support him on the progressive left that he is one of them, to remind them of that. This man is someone who has not come to bad socialism type ideas through a kind of, I don't know, working class, I just think poor people should have more of a say in how their businesses run kind of thing. He is a hardcore, well-educated, ideologically committed democratic socialist. He is extremely ideological. He is of that movement, and he wants to signal to those people he is one of them. If his project is not ultimately proves to be as scary as it could be, it is only because he will face whatever the reasonable constraints are in New York, or the same constraints that Bill de Blasio and others have faced. Make no mistake that the project he would enact is radical, and it is terrifying, and it is increasingly the direction maybe that the Democratic Party will choose for itself in the coming years. And it is really no laughing matter, frankly, is my view.
Yeah, socialism. Don't like it in Venezuela. Don't like it in New York. And we're going to talk about the future of the Democratic Party and the vibes of the party right now, what's going on there, in just a moment after we come back from an ad. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. The new year doesn't require a new you, but maybe it requires a less burdened you. And therapy can help. Therapy helps identify what weighs you down, what holds you back. It offers an unbiased perspective to better understand your relationships, your motivations, and your emotions. If you're afraid, if you're putting too much pressure on yourself every day, then therapy can help. And BetterHelp has so many benefits. Quality therapists, therapist match commitment. BetterHelp does the initial matching work for you so you can focus on your therapy goals. So the way it works is there's a short questionnaire, helps identify your needs and your preferences. And then with 12 years of experience and industry-leading match fulfillment rate, BetterHelp pretty much gets it right on the first time. But if you are not happy with your therapist match, you can switch to a different therapist at any time from many tailored recommendations. The client reviews show that it works. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is one of the world's largest online therapy platforms. It's served over 5 million people globally already, and it works. There's an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 for a live session based on over 1.7 million client reviews. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist. If you sign up, you can get 10% off at betterhelp.com/roundtable. That's betterhelp.com/roundtable. All right, so we have a listener question from Curtis this week. Reminder, we always like to answer your questions. As long as they are short, succinct, pithy, and not very long, you can send your questions to podcasts@reason.com. That is podcasts at reason.com. This week's question is about Minnesota and the Somali, the fraud, the Medicaid fraud that has been associated with the Somali community there. Curtis writes, I listened to your last roundtable. You say you can't lump all the Somalis together, but why can't you take into account things like culture or religion? Somalia is the second most corrupt nation in the world. Is it so surprising, the level of graft of those in the USA? Old habits die hard. Where were the problems in the UK when they had large Caribbean and Chinese immigration? They and the rest of Europe are discovering the problems of large-scale Muslim immigration. Shouldn't things like that be taken into consideration in admitting people to a nation? How would you reform immigration to avoid those dilemmas? Katherine, let's start with you. There's a lot of fraud in Minnesota. It seems to be deeply embedded in the Somali community, even though it's not to say that every Somali or even most, but like a lot of the perpetrators are Somalis, right? Like, why isn't that a factor when thinking about immigration?
I mean, this is back to my frigid, rugged individualism, I guess. I think people should be treated as individuals. And I do think it should be a factor when we think about immigration. But I think the way that we should factor it in is we should build systems that are not ripe for exploitation. We should think about the fact that there is a wide range of human experience, not just in Somali immigrants, but also among native born. And some people are going to be garbage fraudsters. And some people are going to be good, upstanding citizens. And I wish that Nick Gillespie were here to give us his little song and dance that he often does about the joys of living in a high trust society, which, you don't know what you got till it's gone and all that good stuff. But we should not, as the Federalist Papers noted, and as many, many others have noted around that time and since, you can't build a society purely on the presumption that culture can carry all of the foibles of the state. It should be, if anything, the other way around. We should build government systems that are capacious enough and are careful enough to handle the fact that there will be bad people inside those systems, and there were some bad people in the case of this fraud story, and I hope they get punished. But I think holding against a group of people who want to come here, maybe people who were leaving their home country's culture or government precisely because they too recognize that it was a dark and bad culture and they want to get away from it, to say like, sorry, you came from a place with a bad culture. You can't flee it and come here and be part of our good culture, to me is to get it exactly the wrong way around. Like, I get that this person is asking the most reasonable version of this question, and I appreciate it. Like, shouldn't we be realists? And we should. But I don't think the proper way of doing that is to say, our systems are what they are, therefore we must treat people as collectives when they come here or when they want to come here.
Robby, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, in terms of the immigration policy, it's a little different. We all want vetting done. We want people to come to this country who are going to work hard and who are smart and who are not going to rip off the American public. And there's probably more crude regional stereotyping that goes into the decisions that immigration bureaucrats make that we're all more or less not super comfortable with, but that's part of it. Once they're here, though, once you're in America, and many of these accused Somalian fraudster people, they're American citizens or they're the descendants of immigrants. They're part of the diaspora, but they have rights. And at that point, you have to absolutely treat people as individuals. So maybe it's a little different in terms of the immigration policy because people who are not yet here in the United States don't have the same rights, don't have the protections of the Constitution until they get here, and then you do, and your descendants do. Moreover, when we talk, I think it would be really helpful to relearn a kind of color blindness discourse. And not all these things are the same because religion and culture are chosen values to some extent. It's not the same thing as, literally your ethnicity, things you didn't choose. We should be absolutely colorblind to, and we should rediscover that color blindness. And I very much blame people of the woke, liberal, left, progressive disposition for greatly re-injecting notice race, talk about race, how that affects you. We are seeing that in a disastrous way, the consequences of that coming back into our lives so powerfully, and how that has affected discourse on the right in a very unhelpful way. But you see it look at Tim Walz, who I think I'm I am very glad to say that has exited the Minnesota governor's race. He will not be a political figure. But you look at how he tries to defend the Somali community. I would defend them by saying, well, yes, root out the fraud, but individuals are individuals, and no one should be held in contempt or presumed responsible just because someone else happens to look like them or is from the same country as them. And he said repeatedly, well, but how, you're so worried about Somalis, but what about white guys? What about white what about white supremacy? What about white people and all the wrongs they did? I'm like, well, how can you say we're not supposed to care about race? And that's your defense, is look at some other group. That has been how people of a progressive disposition have handled this. And it is unpersuasive because it is hypocritical and it hasn't worked.
Matt, what about you?
There were 5 questions in this question. So I'm going to take the cheeky way out and address actually just an assertive statement, an aphorism: old habits die hard. I would gently suggest that maybe one of the old habits that die hard is the habit of underrating the ability of America to make bad old habits from the mother countries go away faster than you expect. The classic case, obviously, is that every single immigrant group in the history of America, by the third generation, and usually the second, they speak English and they don't speak the mother tongue anymore. It's over. That is a sign of assimilation, a machine that
also, you can get their food in the frozen aisle of the grocery store.
Yes, or at least you could. Back when we didn't have the average tariff jacked up to 15%. But we have been down this road before of thinking that we need to take into account culture and religion of, for example, these people who they like the Catholic Church and they're not Protestants like the vast majority of the country. They come from absolutely poop hole countries. I was trying to keep it clean, Catherine.
Thank you.
Like Ireland and southern Italy, my God. Poland, back in the 1850s, from 1850 to 1920, the population went from about 5% Catholic to about 17% Catholic. And people were not here for it. They did not like it at all, or at least a lot of people didn't. There was the rise of the Know-Nothing Party because of that. There's worries about dual loyalty. I don't just bring this up as a gotcha. I'm going to take it for granted, just because Robby's with us, that those dirty Italians, and because Nick isn't with us, the dirty Italians are all messed up and they're difficult to assimilate, and yet we managed to do it.
I'm a Northern Italian. We can take as many as those as we want. It's just those Southern Italians we can't have.
At any rate, every single nation of or ethnic origin or country of origin that has come in my lifetime have been treated to this analysis. Cambodians in Long Beach, Vietnamese in Westminster, Cubans in Miami, even during the Mariel boat lift. And we continue to surprise. It doesn't mean that there isn't clusters like the Somalis in Minneapolis, which is just awful, the amounts of fraud that's happening there. But it does mean that a place that's corrupt, like Iran, with a weirdo religion like Islam, compared to our dominant now Judeo-Christian, whatever the hell that is, religion, Iranians are some of the most successful immigrants in this country. So have a little bit of faith in our assimilation machine, and don't break that machine by over-obsessing about the characteristics of the country of origins. Katherine said these end up being some of our better people. Doesn't mean you can't shape an immigration policy a hell of a lot better than we have been doing for a long time under both major political parties. But I think we should have some faith in America.
Oh, and can I add one thing that Matt just reminded me of? The other argument I was going to make, the question asker, it never ends there, or almost never ends there. It's the people who want to vastly restrict immigration never actually stop. It's a Mott and Bailey thing where they say it's never just, well, there's this one area of the world, there's one country that has really disproportionately people who have robbed us of our social services or whatever, and we need to reconsider them. It's always, and also Muslim people, look at all these refugees, look at the crime that's really bad. And also all these Latin American immigrants who, and then the the criticism totally shifts to they're doing too much work. They're ripping us off not enough. They're actually taking jobs and providing, and that's bad. And also all those high-skilled Indian and Asian immigrants who are coming here who we can't get enough of because our companies need them so badly. We have to stop all that. And then you're forced to concede, okay, I thought this was a targeted concern about one specific group. No, that's always a cover for a broader project of making the U.S. Actually less productive and wealthy and prosperous by cutting us off to all sorts of immigrants who we know do us a lot of good and don't even have these same problems. So I'm inclined to dismiss those arguments on that basis, since it's never confined to just that concern.
Yeah, if you are concerned about fraud in the welfare system, fix the welfare system. Don't try and fix this, through immigration, through some sort of secondhand mechanism. We're going to move on to our final segment here, which I'm going to call Last Walz, because we're bringing back segment titles. The two-term Minnesota governor, former Democratic vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, is not going to run for a third term. This follows the growing scandal that we've been talking about here over billions in Medicaid fraud in Minnesota. Robby, good riddance, right?
Yes. I have not been a fan of this guy for a lot of vibes-based reasons, but we should never just pay attention to vibes. Also because his policies are, as Minnesota governor, have been among the least friendly to libertarians, to liberty of any governor in the country. I had a post at reason.com just go up about this, but his COVID governance, reprehensible, all the sorts of social distancing enforcement, masking enforcement that you would expect, plus a COVID snitch hotline so you could report your neighbors, have some of that warmth of collectivism we love so much. It has lines like, socialism is just neighborliness, misinformation, that's not protected by the First Amendment, all the greatest hits of kind of far-left democratic thinking. This was someone Kamala Harris picked for some reason and elevated to the national prominence.
She picked him to reach out to young men. That's the funniest thing was Tim Walz was the Democratic Party's outreach to young men, disaffected young dudes who were like listening to too many podcasts and like drifting towards Trump. That didn't work.
Yeah, he's a walking, talking, how do you do, my fellow kids type meme. There was no indication that he had some savviness for reaching, and he kept always putting it as white dudes, when really Kamala Harris was struggling with dudes of all skin colors and particularly young ones. So I'm not even sure that he or she or the campaign had diagnosed the problem correctly, what the value add that he even thought he was doing was the right one. In any case, it's neither here nor there. He is not going to run for reelection to a third term, and this is, I suspect, the end of his greater national aspirations, and very much good riddance because he was a tyrant on so many liberty issues.
Matt, this is a pretty stunning fault for someone who was the Democratic Party's pick for backup president. I mean, just a year over ago, right? Does this tell us anything about the kind of the state of the Democratic Party and its internal psychodrama, like about the leadership failures there?
Yeah, I think it does, actually. Name the last good Democratic vice presidential nominee. Like, seriously. It's been a hell of a century. We've had John Edwards. Catherine liked him. We had Kamala Harris. She turned out awesome. You just like because of the hair. Yep. You like those Carolina boys with their smooth talking. All kinds of guys named Tim. None of them were any good or interesting. It all feels like very focus group. Like, okay, if we get this person who checks off these boxes that will appeal to this voter, it's hilarious to watch. If you just ever developing humor as a mechanism to deal with the fact that our politics is producing ghastly human beings, especially at the national and presidential level.
Dipshit problem. I've been saying Tim Walz. And the dipshit problem. Democratic Party, Republican Party too, in some ways. Katherine, I want to ask you about another aspect of this. So he is resigning. He's not saying he's resigning because of the Somali Medicaid fraud story, but it's pretty clear that is what is driving his decision to spend more time with his family. And that story was going around in like all throughout December, but then it really blew up and took off after a viral video by a young YouTuber, I think, named Nick Shirley visited a whole bunch of these Minnesota daycares and found no one there. even though they were getting money from the state. Now, some of the specifics of that reporting still in dispute, right? This was not a highly fact-check investigation on his part, but he drew attention to the issue. And he took a victory lap today, posting, "I ended Tim Walz." Ended Tim Walz's Democratic career, maybe. But what do you think about the role here that is played by like a young video influencer? Like, should he be sort of celebrating? I mean, or is this a little more complicated than that?
I mean, there's been a bunch of back and forth because part of the coverage around this story has been the meta conversation about whether mainstream papers and mainstream, television outlets have covered the story. And there's been this kind of interesting back and forth, right? Where like the Times and other places have said like, actually, we covered this story several months ago and no one really cared. You didn't really break anything. Like, what are we talking about here? So I think, what that points to is that it wasn't the sheer facts that caused this to break through this month. It was the way it was presented and who was ready to hear it and why. I kind of count Tim Walz here as one of the many, many, many victims over the last 10 years of people who just like got too tired about how things are. And like maybe I too am one of those victims, but like particularly people in elected office who just for whatever reason didn't run again or maybe ran but somewhat half-heartedly, got primaried out, whatever it was, got pushed out explicitly by Trump, by name. This is just people who looked at the possible gains to them of another term in office and said, this is deeply unappealing and I don't know why I would. So I think it's less about, did this specific story tip him over? Like anyone who wants to can claim the scalp. I think, Kamala Harris could equally be like, I did Tim Walz in, haha. But
she also did herself in.
But she did herself in. But I think the kind of bigger picture of like, this guy's a true believer. He's drunk his own Kool-Aid, whatever it is that he thinks he's doing, he would like to keep doing it. And it doesn't seem fun or like it's going to work anymore. And there are so many people who have peeled out of politics on that same theory. And, I'm deeply skeptical of every politician, but I don't think we should lose the ones who are hopeful about doing something good and keep the ones who are like, ooh, I like it when cameras pointed at me. Because I do think that's kind of who's left. I was reading Walz's statement, his goodbye statement, and I was struck by the fact that it sounds like it's written by AI. And then I realized all politicians have always sounded like AI sounds now. And I now want to like turn that into a full thesis, but like, I will not mince words. Like, make no mistake. Don't make me repeat myself. Like, there's these kind of crutches that politicians use that are very similar to what AI uses. These sort of simple metaphors, the sort of a three-part answer, that kind of thing. And there's something about, oh no, we built our robots to be a little bit too sycophantic and stupid, and their prose all comes out the same way, and it sounds just like Tim Walz. Like, that's something I think that we should probably be concerned about.
It's not Somali fraud. It's white supremacy. M-.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I like that your theory about Tim Walz is basically the old the bicycle joke that I told when I was 8. Right? Why didn't the bicycle get up? Because it was too tired.
I hate it here. I'm also too tired to keep going.
We're gonna move on to the final segment here, which is our cultural recommendations: movies, books, television, other things we've been watching, consuming in the cultural realm. And I am gonna start because I saw Marty Supreme. I talked about this a little bit on last week's episode, but this is the new movie from Josh Safdie, who's one half of the Safdie brothers. Stars just absolutely incredible, manic, sort of over-the-top Timothée Chalamet as a ping-pong hustler in 1950s New York. And he's always working a scam. He is telling lies. He is like a politician. He's just telling people what they need to hear at any given moment, not worrying about whether or not he can deliver on that promise. There's something kind of delightful about it. And it's seeing this sort of in action at small scale, right? And the whole goal for him is that he wants to go to Japan so that he can so that he can finally win a ping pong competition, because he lost in the first act to a Japanese player in a London competition. And this is a movie about fake it till you make it success in post-war America. And it is just like captures that relentless, restless drive to do absolutely whatever it takes to succeed. There is so much energy in this movie. And while I think it's fair to say, as some folks, including my wife, have said, that Chalamet is playing a character who is fundamentally unlikable in some way because he doesn't really care about anyone else, about other people, except maybe in the last few minutes of the movie, it's just so ridiculously watchable. You just kind of got to go along for the ride as like he roadrunners or Wile E. Coyotes his way through this thing. And you're like, is he finally going to realize there's no ground under him? Is this going to not work? No. And it keeps because he keeps like adding a scam on top of another scam, on top of another scam. Every single hustle is solved with another hustle until you get to the very end of the movie, right? And it only works as long as the scams keep going. So definitely a metaphor for politics, for sort of post-war America. It is probably not for everyone, but I loved it. This is just a madcap, zippy, great piece of American filmmaking by a fairly young filmmaker. He is like in his early 40s. And now, and this is, I think, only like his third or fourth big movie. The last thing he did was 6 years ago was Uncut Gems with his brother, another kind of movie about just making bad decisions and more bad decisions until things end up where they're going to end up. Matt, I think you saw this movie too. What did you think?
I saw it yesterday, a matinee showing with my 17-year-old daughter. Not necessarily the best father-daughter movie, but maybe it is. Who knows? But it was very heartened to see that you can go see a grown-up movie in a theater that was mostly full. People still into it 10 days into the movie. I really, really, really enjoyed it. The hustle is incredible. Just the hustle. It's got a really great energy to it. A lot of really good performances, including Gwyneth Paltrow, who's kind of at her best. And then just like so many randos in there. Ratso Sloman is in there. George Iceman Gervin, Penn Jillette is in there. He's normal compared to most people. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I took it, Peter, as a meditation on fatherhood. And I think history will prove me correct. I
think Josh Safdie has already indicated that is at least part of what he was thinking, especially with the ending. Just like a little bit of a spoiler here. A little bit of a spoiler.
No spoilers.
Now, but like,
don't. Suderman.
The very end is... okay, so all right. But Josh Safdie had two kids. His first two kids between the last movie he made, Uncut Gems, and this one. And I think that probably affected him and how, especially the ending of this movie. Yeah, it's a great movie. It seems like in fact a good thing to take your kid to.
It can be 17-year-old daughters and certain scenes strange, awkward to watch with fathers, but yeah, highly recommend it. And it's something to think about fatherhood.
Catherine, are you going to tell us about dog yoga or something else?
I did go to puppy yoga, and it was taken.
But I hate yoga.
Somewhat hostage by my family, and we all went together, and it was both some of the worst yoga that I've ever attended, and the puppies were pretty cute. It was dachshunds and Shiba Inus, so I think I somehow ended up like with pockets full of Dogecoin at the end. But the thing I'm going to talk about
not pockets
is,
full of dog treats.
No, I should have brought them.
Come back and
honestly,
get like all that like grainy, like little weird, like protein bits that are like stuck to the inside of your pocket.
Oh, this is not an experience I've had, nor that I want to have. But I should have brought dog treats because there were too few dogs per people. So there was like I should have had something to, entice them over. Anyway, I watched A Man on the Inside, the second season. I think I recommended the first season on this year's show. It is Ted Danson as a geriatric assistant to a private detective, and she sends him in undercover, in this case at a community college or a small college that is about to go under. A crime has to be investigated. It's Michael Schur, and so he did The Good Place, he did Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he did The Office, he did all kinds of stuff. If you like that kind of show, you're going to love this show. It's awesome. This season features Ted Danson with his real-life wife, Mary Steenburgen, and that is very charming as well. The real pitch, I would say, for this show is that the interactions between the generations are by far the most realistic of any show that I have ever seen. Just like the teenage kids on this show are like nearly unintelligible lumps with tiny flashes of redemption in a way that is really, really real. And then the relationship between Ted Danson and his daughter, the mother of said teenage lumps, also just extremely, extremely realistic. Not exactly my experience in either case, but like a thing that looks like the way people really interact, which one reason that I like to watch short, funny shows is because I think life is sort of short and funny. And, you know, not everything is high drama ping pong or whatever you guys are watching. Sometimes there's just like some little funny bits and you go about your day, and some little sad bits and then some funny bits again and you go about your day. And that is my recommendation for A Man on the Inside, season 2.
That's an interesting observation that you like these things because you think that that form reflects life. Whereas I like a 2.5-hour movie about Timothée Chalamet just bullshitting, just like motor mouthing his fucking way through that movie. Like absolutely does not stop talking no matter what. Anybody else starts talking, he just bulldozes right over them, says some stuff. Some of it's interesting, some of it maybe not so, like some of it's kind of ill-advised, but he just will not stop, and he just keeps it going until he finally gets to the end and gets the thing, kind of gets something real that he can latch onto. And that's what he's looking for 2.5 hours, and that's what I'm looking for in a movie too, because that's what I think life is like. That's what my life is like. Robbie, what's your life like, and what do you have for us this week?
We survived.
I'm also recommending a detective fiction type thing. Longtime viewers or listeners of me on any of my 18 trillion more than necessary commentary videos I participate in know that I'm a huge fan of Agatha Christie and Hercule Poirot. In particular, Poirot is my favorite literary character. I've read all of the Poirot stories numerous times, but they have been continued. There's a spiritual successor. Sophie Hannah is a novelist who has written an authorized by the Christie estate series of subsequent Hercule Poirot books, and a recent one just came out in the last few weeks. I've already read it. It's called The Last Death of the Year. It's a murder mystery at a New Year's Eve party, so it was a very fitting end of the year read. It has a great setup for a murder where everybody puts a New Year's resolution in a bowl, and one of them is a plot to commit murder. From that, it kind of lost a little bit of steam, and
so it's a party game based murder mystery.
It is a party game
and you
based
liked
murder
it?
mystery.
Yeah,
and unsurprisingly,
this is in fact what your life is like.
Yeah, I've played a lot of party games in the last week, including some terrific rounds of Secret Hitler, where our house rule is when you implement a fascist or liberal policy, you actually have to declare what your fascist or liberal policy would be in the event you were doing this. But that's neither here nor there. I enjoyed the read. These are not, with all due respect to Sophie Hannah, they don't sparkle with exactly the same love and magic and joy as Agatha Christie's original works, but I appreciate the valiant effort, and I will read each and every last one of them. I hope she continues writing them for a very long time. So thank you, Sophie Hannah. Last Death of the Year. I enjoyed it.
I actually started reading my very first Agatha Christie novel just a couple of days ago, Dumb Witness. It's the one with the cute dog.
Yes. I've read that one. I do remember that one. That's
weird,
a good one.
Weird pick for your first, but okay.
The ball, his ball. What is the dog's name in that?
Bob.
That's right.
The
Bob
cute
and his
dog,
ball.
the little terrier who's got a strong opinion about some particular people, and also has maybe his playing with his ball is definitely going to prove to be very important to the resolution of this mystery. And that is a good opportunity to resolve this show. All right, folks, as always, if you like this podcast, you can support us by going to reason.com/donate. That's reason.com/donate. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, the Reason Roundtable will return, and we have a live show. If you're still listening, you're probably a good candidate to come to our live show here in Washington, D.C. next month. Go to reason.com/events to pick up tickets and get more details.